Hey, welcome. Today we're going to talk about our first French film of 1970. And I'm going to attempt to say the French title, which I believe is something like La Rosée Ecorchée. This translates to the flayed rose or the skinned rose. And this was released in the United States as The Blood Rose. So this is our first French movie of 1970. Well, first fully French movie, although we did have Les Regines, the Queens, also known as Queens of Evil. That was an Italian and French co-production. We also had The Red Sign of Madness, also known as Hatchet for the Honeymoon. That was Italian, Spanish, French co-production, and that one actually took place in Paris. So I guess that one was pretty French, although I'm pretty sure they spoke English in that movie. I guess when they had enough countries working together there, they just chose English. But this one's actually French. It's in French. They speak French. It's a fully French production and takes place in France as well. So this one started off kind of slow. It was, I don't know, if you take a look at this poster, it looks pretty good. We've got a disfigured woman. We've got a dwarf with a lance. The dwarf is wearing some kind of fur. Oh, by the way, this was directed by Claude Mulot, who didn't do too many French movies. I mean, he didn't do too many horror movies. He directed 10 movies between 1968 and 1986. But this may have been his only horror movie, and most of his movies are relatively unknown outside of France, I guess including this one. But this one did get an American release. Actually, Allied Artists released it in the United States. So, what's going on in this movie? We have an artiste, and he has a beautiful girlfriend. And then he's an artist, so he paints women, and among other things. And even though he has a girlfriend, then he meets another woman who he actually falls in love with and marries. And at the wedding, the previous girlfriend shows up and fights the new bride, pushes her into a bonfire, and she is hideously disfigured and physically disabled. So the artist, being a shallow person, as we've already established, ends up not being attracted to her anymore because she has this gross face, and continues to paint models. And actually he tells everyone that his wife died in the fire, even though she didn't. And we've got him cheating on her. So she doesn't like that. And I mean, that's the premise. Well, no, there's one more piece to it, actually. What am I thinking? The other piece is that the artist meets a surgeon, and the surgeon, he's doing some illegal surgeries. So the artist blackmails him and says, I want you to give my wife a face transplant. And the surgeon says, well, that's not really possible unless we take the face off a living woman. And the artist is like, all right, do that then. So that's the premise, okay? Before I get into the details of the movie, I'm going to say I give this one a 7 out of 10. The story started off slow but got more interesting as it went along. It was pretty unique. The whole dwarf thing, which I didn't mention yet, but there's 2 dwarves that live in the attic. The artist actually buys a castle, or no, owns a castle, grew up in a castle, moves in there with his wife, who soon becomes disfigured, and there are 2 dwarves, including the one on this poster here, that live in the attic. And the dwarves really do make the movie more interesting and more unique. And I'll talk more about that later, but I wanted to give you a piece of this video that has no spoilers in it before you decide if you want to watch the rest of it or not. So 7 out of 10. As of this recording, you can find it for free on YouTube, dubbed. I was not able to find a French version of this, which I imagine would be better than dubbed version. Although the dubbing wasn't very bad at all. It sounded a lot more natural than some Italian movies that are dubbed in English. The dubbing was pretty good, probably because it had a proper release by Allied artists. All right, so that's the non-spoiler version of this video if you want to stay on with me. When a movie's really, really good, I would say, you know, turn the video off. This one, if you're intrigued, turn it off. Watch the video for free. Watch the movie for free on YouTube. Or you can, you know, contact Allied artists and see if you can get some kind of legal version, although I don't think that exists. Not with an American release anyway. Okay, so spoiler time. What happens in this movie and what makes it really interesting? Okay, we've got these dwarves that live in the attic. We've got a crazy disfigured woman. We've got a super horny artist guy. And we've got a morally corrupt surgeon. And so the first third of the movie is really setting it up, and then the last hour of the movie is the surgeon and the artist and the crippled, disfigured wife, like hunting for beautiful women, and they're trying to find one to bring and to take her face off and put on the face of the wife, okay? So, I mean, that is a pretty interesting premise, like, no matter how you look at it. So, the first woman that the husband cheats with, actually is just fully killed by the wife via plant. That's why it's called the Flayed rose, although you never see, like, the flower. But there's this plant with thorns, and apparently, if it pricks you once, you die instantly. So the wife basically asks this woman to come water the plant. And she's like, oh, can you please water it? Make sure you spread the leaves apart. I need you to make sure you water it properly. The girl spreads the leaves apart, pricks her finger, dies instantly. It's really corny. That part was silly. All right, moving forward. They are scouting out women to steal a face from. They find one, they bring her in, the artist seduces her, and then she figures out that they're gonna do something messed up to her, so she tries to run away, but the dwarves stop her, and the dwarves end up bringing her up into the attic where they live, which apparently has like hay or straw all over the floor. And they try and like subdue her, but she keeps fighting them. And we have this pretty entertaining fight scene between this woman and these two dwarves. And the dwarves end up ripping her clothes off and fighting her while she's naked. And then they end up accidentally killing her by like smashing her in the face with a chair. So now her face is ruined and they can't even, use her face. And so then the wife, the disfigured wife, gets extremely upset and beats the dwarves with like some kind of whip, not a whip, but like a thing that you would kind of like flog people with. So, you know, the dwarves don't really like that very much, but it happens. The wife accuses the dwarves, whose names, by the way, are Olaf and Igor. She accuses them of wanting her to remain disfigured and look like a monster because they look like monsters. So she was really awful towards these dwarves. Apparently the dwarves have been in the family, the husband's family, since before he was born. And they've lived there since his parents owned this castle. All right, final third of the movie. They are still hunting. They don't find anyone, and then Then this woman who's beautiful starts walking through the woods. She's actually looking for her sister, whom they have killed earlier. Now, I didn't catch if the sister of this woman was the woman who died via plant prick, or if she was the one that was beaten to death by dwarves. But either way, she's looking for her sister. She meets the dwarves in the woods, and they immediately start chasing her with giant axes. She runs to the chateau, which looks different than the castle, and I may have missed if there are two properties or if it just looks different from the back. But anyway, she gets there, the artist lets her in, then it starts storming. She has to stay the night, and so she stays the night, and then the dwarves tie her up, and everything's going to go fine. They get the surgeon in there. The surgeon's getting prepared. The surgeon's going to perform the surgery. He needs some privacy. So everyone leaves the room, and then while they all leave the room, he hangs himself. So no surgery. Then this is the best part, okay? Just in case it now sounds cool and you haven't turned this off yet, turn it off now if you want to watch the movie, okay? Because this is the best part. Best part is, now that the surgeon has hanged himself, the wife flips out again, okay? She screams at the dwarves and says it's all their fault. Now, this time it is not their fault. The last time it kind of was. This time it's not their fault at all. So this is like the final straw for the dwarves, and they knock the woman over, push her out of her wheelchair, and then beat the shit out of her. They beat her to death. They kick her while she's down, punch her, slap her in the face. They beat her till she's dead. I was pretty surprised because most of this movie was pretty tame, like dying of rose prick or whatever, you know, not a big deal. And even when she fell in the fire, it wasn't really that crazy. But having these dwarves beat a handicapped woman to death, a disabled woman to death, was more than I was expecting. And I always like to be surprised in a movie. Meanwhile, the artist feels his wife is dead now. There's no reason for any kind of surgery. The wife is dead. The surgeon is dead. He doesn't have a problem with the dwarves. He's actually protected them for the whole movie. So as far as he's concerned, like, it's all over now. He takes the surgeon's scalpel, and he goes to cut this beautiful woman that has been abducted loose. He starts to cut her loose, turns around, and what do you know? Olaf over here is coming after him with this halberd spear. And so he has to fight. There's another dwarf fight scene. This is the third dwarf fight scene in the movie. So he has to fight this dwarf. He is unarmed, and this dwarf has a long, I believe halberd is the right word. It's a pretty good fight, and it goes on, and then there's the artist, who's fully grown, grabs this guy by his bald head, punches him in the face a few times, kicking him while he's down, kicking a dwarf while he's down. It's just strange. Anyway, the dwarf gets up, grabs a halberd, stabs, impales the artist through the stomach. You think he's gonna die. And then the woman finally gets herself free, gets the scalpel, and kills the dwarf by slashing him in the face with the scalpel over and over and over again. So this movie definitely does have payoff towards the end. So we've got bleeding artist, dead wife, dead dwarf, dead hanging surgeon, and the abducted woman escapes. And then you do have the other dwarf there, so we don't know what's going to happen there, but he ends up just kind of mourning his brother or whatever. One more thing we got to talk about. I should have talked about this in the beginning of the movie, but it says here the first sex horror film ever made. Now, this can't this can't be true. Like, this is just a stupid tagline. There's only one sex scene in the whole movie where, like, people, like, actually almost have sex, but then, like, it's really just foreplay. It happens early on in the movie. And then later, we aren't sure, but the dwarfs may rape that woman in the middle of the movie. But I think they might try to rape her, and then in the struggle she dies. So I don't think they successfully rape her. So I guess that's another sex scene, but like one or two sex scenes in the whole movie, like, really doesn't count. Like, there are some, like, naked women throughout the movie, but, like, that's kind of par for the course, isn't it? So I reject that first sex horror film ever made. I don't think it says that in French. Let's see, what do we got? Any taglines here? Well, I don't know if this is the tagline or not, but I can't read it. So I don't think we even have a tagline. I like this poster. I've got the eye, like, bleeding the scene. Pretty cool. I love all these 1970 hand-drawn posters. But this one's cool too. Also hand-drawn, not bloody. Also, the woman doesn't look like that in the movie. Her entire face is disfigured, not just part of it. She's not Two-Face from Batman. Also, that is not the hairstyle that she has. She has very long, pretty hair in the movie. Here you can kind of see the castle. And this is the first woman that dies who gets pricked by the rose, and I guess that's the rose on top of her, although they don't put the rose on top of her in the movie, I don't think. Also, they kind of gypped the other dwarf out of this. They should put both dwarves on there, because that's just one of them. All right. This is much more than I expected to talk about the Blood Rose, but it was pretty fun. All right, I'll see you next time. Take care.